And
yes, we can see that.
Excellent. Great. And I see some familiar names in the chat, so I'm super excited about that. Some folks that I know. So I just want to give y'all sorry, I'm from the South, so I say y'all, a little bit of a warning. I do work for hospice, so I will sometimes throughout my presentation mention hospice and bereavement care, but I don't go into any specifics with that. I do mention cancer and death very briefly in the beginning of my presentation, so if that will be difficult for you, please feel free to pop off for a minute or two and then pop back in. Be kind to yourself, and if you need to take a break, please do so. There's no harm in doing that. And I would rather you did that than be upset and agitated. So take care of yourself. All right. Who am I and why am I speaking at content, folks? So my name is Michelle Keller, and I am the content design lead for bereavement services at Care Hospice in Virginia. I've been here just a little under 2 years. Before that, I was doing some freelance work in UX design. And before that, I was a social worker and a host of other things. So my path to content design has been anything but linear. I live just outside the Blue Ridge Mountains in Virginia in the US. And yes, it really is as beautiful as that picture. The picture there in the front was taken Christmas of 2022, and that's my parents and my husband and my 2 daughters. My mom passed away about 6 weeks after that picture was taken from cancer, and she was receiving hospice care for the last 4 months of her life, and that is part of what fuels my love for what I do. I want to create content that helps other families who are grieving. I write about my own content journey on Medium, and I'm going to share a little bit of that with you today. And I hope that this talk will be encouraging to you, especially if you're a solo practitioner, that you'll leave this feeling less alone. And if you're not, that you'll leave this talk feeling more motivated to encourage those that you know who are solo practitioners. So I don't know if you are the only content designer at your company, or you're the only one with your particular job title, or maybe you're on a great team, but you're contemplating a job change where you'd be a solo practitioner. But I'm glad you're here, whatever the reason is that you came. For me, I am the only designer of any kind at my hospice, and I'm currently responsible for all of our content for bereaved families. So right now that content resides primarily on 24 different websites, and then some newsletters that we send out. When I started at my hospice, I didn't really know anything about content design or UX, and I had so many questions, especially because I was a solo designer. It was more than just a little overwhelming. I didn't know where to go for support. I didn't know how to get better at what I was doing. I didn't know how to understand content design better myself, and then how to help my company understand it better. But I knew that at some point I might need a team of folks, but I didn't even know where to get started in that. So what's a girl to do? Or a guy? Panic. Actually, no, that's not your best move, though I won't lie. There was a little bit of that happened. Networking is the answer. Not networking as you may normally think about it. This definition from Merriam-Webster is always entertaining to me because it sounds so heady, right? The exchange of information, the cultivation of productive relationships, that feels a little overwhelming and intimidating. Especially, I happen to consider myself an introvert. So that kind of networking and giving this talk feel way out of my comfort zone. I have some other ways that I might define networking, like awkward social conversation in the hopes of making a business connection, or selling myself to try and land a better job. That's why I love freelance work. Hitting up anyone and everyone on LinkedIn, hoping that I can find a better job. And really, though, it's something that I don't ever want to do again. But what if we looked at networking not in that sense as a way to get a new job, but as a way to find our people and to create a team, even if we don't have one officially. So if you're like me and networking terrifies you, or maybe even disgusts you, hopefully you'll feel differently by the time we're done here. So I want to start by looking at networking externally or globally as a way to find your people. I'm not talking about putting together a proposal to hire people and build out a team so you don't have to be alone, but I want to talk about finding those people who will help you grow and encourage you as a content designer. We always want to start with user research, right? So in this case, you actually are the user. That's the user research. Whether you're a new content designer or new to being a solo practitioner, take some time to think about your job. Where do you experience friction? What are the things that most energize you? What are the things that confuse you the most? What types of resources might you need? What feels the most overwhelming? Spend some time thinking about those, and I would even write down your answers. Maybe you want to use a Miro board, whatever works for you. I have a big whiteboard in my office that's helpful. But having all that information on hand will be super helpful as we start to think through, how do I want to focus my networking? Where do you look? Where do you find your people? Where do you find the resources that you need? Where do you take all your questions? I'm going to share with you several different ways to help you get started. And this is what worked for me in my journey. Some of these ideas may not work for you, and that's okay. You may have other ideas. That's also okay. Start small, find out what works, leave aside what doesn't. But I am confident that you'll be able to find your people and not feel so alone. Medium is where I started, and it was pretty low effort in the beginning. If you don't have an account, you can get a free one. That's what I have. Search for articles on topics that address the areas that you identified in your user research. Read some articles, maybe leave some comments, follow a few authors that you're seeing there. When I first started my job, I would spend roughly about an hour every day just searching and reading and commenting. I know that not everyone has that level of flexibility in their schedule, and I'm really grateful that I do. For me, that's one of the advantages of being in a place that didn't understand content design. They just figured I did and I knew what I was doing, so they left me alone to do my job. And especially when I first started, what needed to be done involved a lot of reading and reaching out. Don't be passive, though. Engage with people. If you read an article that's helpful, ask a follow-up question and interact with the author of that. I actually started writing myself on Medium about 6 months ago, thanks to the encouragement of some of the folks on this call. And that's been a way for me to think out loud about some of the different aspects of my job. And that helps me just collect my thoughts and figure out where I'm headed. And now other people actually are reading my articles and commenting on them. And that enables me to further expand my network. You can take then what you've been doing on Medium and move that over into LinkedIn and expand your list of contacts. Look at who's already connected with you and who are the people or organizations that they follow. You can even search for people in a similar field as you. I'll be honest, I searched for content designer hospice and weirdly nothing came up. Hopefully that won't be your experience and you'll actually be able to find some things that will be helpful. All those articles you've been reading on Medium and the authors that you've been interacting with, find them on LinkedIn and reach out to them and see if you can connect with them or follow them. I know it can feel really intimidating and not everybody's going to respond, but that's okay. I took the first step towards finding my people on LinkedIn by connecting with someone that I met in a webinar. In all of my scrolling on Medium, I had found out about a tea time conversation focused on content and death. There may actually be some of you here who were in that call as well. It was the first time that I had seen anything that had to do with content and bereavement. So I signed right up. And in the beginning, you know, where they always say, hey, introduce yourself in the chat. So we were doing that. And then I noticed that there was someone on the call who lives in the same city that I live in. So I reached out to her on LinkedIn and we connected and got together for coffee. She's been tremendously helpful in encouraging me as a content designer. And now we've pulled a third person into our group and we're creating our own community of practice that meets once a month at a local coffee shop. But my LinkedIn connections didn't stop with just her. She had a different network than I had, and she was able to make some connections for me that I couldn't have made for myself. Every time I mention to other content people that I work in content for hospice, the first response I get is, have you met Helen Lawson? And I only had to say no once. And then my LinkedIn connection introduced me via LinkedIn to Helen. Helen has been amazing and so very lovely. She wanted to meet with me. She's looked at content for me and given me some feedback. And I'm so grateful for her help. But honestly, though, I was terrified in the beginning. It's hard to put myself out there, especially with people that I recognize as experts. My impostor syndrome voice says, seriously, why on earth would they want to talk to you? But I don't have to listen to that voice. I can take the first step. I can send the message. And I'm so glad I reached out. But one caution here, don't just hit up everybody on LinkedIn. Be a little selective and send a message with your connection request. Mention how you encountered them. Hey, I was in this webinar that you led the other day, or I read this article that you wrote on XYZ, or listened to you on a podcast. And then invite them to keep the conversation going. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic that I'm working on. I occasionally get random connection requests now, and I'm far less likely to accept those than I am the specific ones that indicate how they found me and why they want to connect. Those requests I'm happy to accept, and my network is growing with lots of really incredible people. One thing that I was definitely lacking when I first started in my current position was someone who could answer my questions and help me figure out what on earth I was doing. I didn't have a manager or a team to go to. I have a manager, but he doesn't know anything about content or design. And there was no previous employee in my position who could help onboard me. I'm the first and only person to hold this job. So I turned to ADP lists. And I know people have had a wide range of experience with ADP lists. I actually have found them to be really helpful. So search for topics that match your passion or your biggest skill gap. I did a lot of searching for mentors who were skilled in being solo designers or growing a content team because I knew that that's where I needed help the most. I would read reviews of previous sessions that they'd had to kind of get a feel for their approach in mentoring. And then I would just schedule. In my experience, the better prepared I was for those sessions, the more helpful they were. 30 minutes goes by crazy fast, unless you're the one giving the talk and it feels like it takes a really long time. But in a mentoring session, when you're trying to get all your questions answered, 30 minutes goes by fast. So come prepared with a list of questions and things that you want to know. And then at the end of every session, I would ask, where else can I go? Who else should I follow or connect with? What else should I read? And not every session was equally helpful, but some of them were incredibly helpful. I would think probably around my 5th session that I had, and I had different people each time that I signed up for a mentor, just trying to find one that clicked really well with me. I did find someone, Shannon, who lives in a nearby town, and she has a ridiculous amount of experience in content design. And I saw that she was going to a meetup. She was speaking at a meetup in this town that was near me. And so I thought, well, I'm going to go. So I went. She remembered me from our mentoring session. And so we've continued that connection. She's been so encouraging and helping me to get rid of imposter syndrome and try new things. She's always encouraging me to write more, speak more, push myself to be better. And she's been a fantastic cheerleader. In fact, we're having lunch next week. And honestly, we all need somebody who can be a great cheerleader in our lives. Meetup. Meetup is another option. I haven't used it a ton. Like I said, I did meet Shannon in person through a meetup, but you can search there for groups that are centered around content design or information architecture, or groups that are local to you. Meetups will often offer in-person and virtual events. I know Content Strategy Seattle here in the US records all their speakers and makes that available on their website. And every speaker is another option of someone that you can follow or connect with on LinkedIn. And if there isn't something near you, you can start something. It doesn't have to be an official meetup. You can just start something on a Slack channel or on LinkedIn. And I'm confident that you are not the only one in your area who's asking questions and wanting to connect. I need a little tea. Honestly, Slack has been my favorite. So ask your contacts what Slack communities they're in. Ask your ADP mentors which ones to join. In the beginning, I joined just about everything anybody mentioned to me. I think at one point I was in like 20 different Slack workspaces. That's excessive. Don't follow my example there. There are so many Slack communities that deal with content and design related issues. So you might have to hop around and try a bunch to find the right fit for you. And at the end, I'll drop links for a couple in the chat that are my favorites. So it's okay if you don't click with a particular group. I tend to be a lurker when I first join a Slack channel, so I do a lot of reading and scrolling and not a lot of posting. But eventually I'll post on the introduction channel and introduce myself, and then I'll start commenting on other people's posts. Some Slack workspaces are really active and very helpful, and some are less so. My two favorites are We Are Content Club and Content Plus UX, and I'll drop information in the chat about that. We Are Content Club has been amazing, and I know there's a number of you on this call today. Thank you for coming. I've found an incredible team all across the world there. Y'all have answered my questions, They've looked at my content, they've supported me and my writing, and they've celebrated my successes with me. It's just been so amazing. One of the things that I find really difficult as a team of one is getting feedback on my content and doing a content crit. I hear everybody talking about it, and we were talking about it in Content Club. And I said, I've never done one. I've never been to one. I've never done one. I would really like to. My hospice is still in the really early learning stages about the value of content design. So there's nobody who's even remotely familiar with the idea of a content crit. But a few of the amazing folks in Content Club offered to run one with me so that I could learn how to do one. So I sent my content to them, and we all got online, and we did a crit together. It was incredible. I was so glad. I got so much helpful feedback. And then another person in the club said, hey, my team is doing a content crit on some content that is kind of nearly associated with death and grief. Would you be willing to join our crit and help us with the content? And so I got to see it from the other side as well. And I was able to take those experiences back and run a crit with my team. They're still learning, but we're making progress. I might be the only content designer at my hospice, but I don't have to be alone. Overall, I would say the thing that's been most valuable to me is simply to reach out, send the email, send the invite, leave the comment on the article. Not everybody is willing to take time to answer my randomly awkward questions, but you might be surprised at who is actually willing to engage. When I first launched our bereavement websites, they were a little clunky in the navigation. That's an understatement. We had 15 options that were all top level. I knew we had an architecture problem. So I did a little Googling, and I found Abby Covert, who wrote a book about information architecture called Making Sense of Any Mess. I had a mess, and I knew I needed help to make sense of it. So on her contact page on her website, she encourages people to reach out if they have a question. I took her at her word, and I reached out. She was so excited to meet with me. We looked at the websites together, and she suggested that I do both an open and a closed card sort to see how the users would organize the information. She walked me through exactly how to do that. As a team of one, I am also the user researcher, and I have no budget. So I used some free software, and I asked around in some of the Slack groups how best to approach my first user research study. Someone suggested developing a screener surveys to make sure that I got the right folks to participate in my card sort. And she even helped me create that survey so that it would work. Abby and I have continued to stay in touch. And I think a couple months ago, she posted on LinkedIn about a new project that she was launching to develop some virtual discussion groups, and was looking for people who might be interested in leading. And I could hear Shannon's voice in my head saying, do it. So really, without putting a lot of thought in it, I just filled out the form. I got accepted. And now I'm actually going to be leading discussion groups online for other folks who are solar practitioners. So if you're interested in that, it's called the Sense Makers Club, and you can follow them on LinkedIn, or you can follow me, and I'll post information about how to get connected with that. Shannon also encouraged me to submit a lightning talk proposal to Utterly Content, and I did, and it got accepted. And Millie saw it and asked me to come and speak to you. So I feel like it's all come in full circle. Don't let imposter syndrome win the day. I know it's easy to second guess ourselves, especially if we're alone. And maybe it was desperation for me, I don't know, but I knew I needed help, and I knew that there were people out there who could help me. So I reached out, and I found the content community as a whole to be incredibly helpful and encouraging and supportive. So don't be afraid, and go ahead and reach out. Sorry, I don't usually talk for this long. A second way to look at networking is internally, looking at who you work with. So even if you don't have a content team of your own, by networking internally, you can find folks at your current company who can be your content allies and help you succeed. I don't know if y'all remember Sesame Street's little song about who are the people in your neighborhood. I'm not going to sing it for you, but their little song was designed to help kids notice all the people who lived and worked around them. And you're never too old to learn from Sesame Street. So who are the people in your work neighborhood? Maybe they work in similar areas, like your marketing department, or maybe the folks who run your intranet, if you have one. Maybe it's the engineers at the endpoint of your product, or the helpline folks who have direct contact with your users. Put on your creative thinking hat and look around and identify who might be willing and able to be a joint content advocate with you. In my hospice, I sit on the compliance team because the US government considers bereavement care to be a compliance issue. I won't get into all the logistics of that, but my manager, when he hired me, didn't entirely know what he was hiring me to do. I didn't really know either, but as we both learned a little bit more, I realized that I needed him to understand what content design is and why it matters. And I know that this is an issue that so many content designers have. I knew that I could just tell him, but that's not as persuasive as showing him the value. So remember my connection I mentioned with Abby Covert in my research study? Well, I took all that information that I got from my open and closed card sorts, and I analyzed all that data, and I reworked our navigation menu. And we went from 15 items down to 3 as a result of that research. I presented those findings to my manager, and he was speechless. His first comment was, wow, we need to talk more to our users. Yes, we do need to talk more to them. And from that moment on, I had him firmly in my camp of the power of content design. He has continued to be an advocate for me in terms of training and resourcing and user research and even a job title change. He knows that my long-term plan is to grow my content team here at the hospice, and he is 100% supportive of me. We're not there yet. We have a long way to go, but it makes such a difference to know that I have him in my corner. But it's not just about going up the chain of command, although that's helpful, obviously, but also just spread out a little bit horizontally and look and see what other departments you might be able to collaborate with. When I first started, I reached out to our marketing department and to the folks who manage our intranet. And I asked them, hey, do we have any kind of a style guide or design system? Marketing responded with a hearty yes. And they sent me brand guides. Not exactly the same thing, but it was a start. My intranet folks didn't have any idea what I was talking about, but they said, hey, if there's something like that, we might like to have it. So those departments both produce content, right? Our marketing department produces lots of content. Our intranet department produces a ton of content on our intranet, but none of us work together. We all work completely separately and siloed. How could we work more together to have a consistent message across all of our content? I'm still working through those challenges, and I'll be honest, we're not getting very far, but I'm not giving up. So in the very beginning, I pulled together that information from marketing, and I pulled together what I got from the intranet team, and I made a style guide, and I made a content brief template, and I created a workflow structure for all the new content. Right now, I'm the only person who uses it, but my hope is that that won't stay that way forever. On our compliance team, I work with 10 other regional bereavement coordinators, and those folks oversee all of our bereavement care, and they work directly with our local offices with the folks who are providing frontline service to our families. None of them even know what content design is. They think of me as the website person. But I got some advice from an ADP mentor about trying to include them in my content team. Now, our compliance team meets twice a month. We just met yesterday. And in each meeting, I ask for a few minutes on the agenda. And I'm slowly introducing them to content design, just a little bit at a time. One of them has already written an article for our website, and she used the style guide and the content brief that I created. And she was the very first person to test out our content workflow. And so we made some adjustments to it after that. And last month, we did our very first content crit in our meeting together. My manager introduced the idea of doing it, and then I ran the crit. I will say about half of the folks understood what we were doing, and they gave really valuable feedback. I'd like to do more crits so that all of them come along and are helpful in that. I'd also like to encourage more of them to write for our website. We're beginning as a team to have conversations about what that might look like. We're talking more about how to be trauma informed as a team. And I'm thinking about how do we do that with our content. And I need their help in order to be better and to serve our families well with our content. So I might not have a team of content designers or UXers or product people, but I don't do my work in a vacuum, and you don't either. So think about that. Who are the people in your work neighborhood? So where do we go from here? That all seems great, Michelle, but it's a little overwhelming, right? I'm already overworked and undersupported. How on earth can I find more time and space to reach out? Well, first, I really want to encourage you to look after your own well-being first. Working as a solo designer or a new designer it can be really challenging and it can be lonely. There's always more work to do that can be done. It's really chaotic much of the time. Finding my people has been a great way for me to practice self-care and to set good boundaries with work. One of the great benefits of the pandemic was the recognition that not all of our work needed to be done face-to-face in an office. That means that my people don't have to be geographically close to me. In fact, my team of regional bereavement coordinators, none of them are in my location, but they can still encourage and support me. And my content club people, we don't just talk about work on our Slack channel. We chat about our pets and the difference between the Queen's English and American English, because I'm usually confused. And we encourage one another to enjoy our weekends. I need that reminder when work feels a little out of control. Recently, in a couple of our local hospices, we had some difficult situations arise, and I was asked to put together some content resources for our staff. So I reached out to my people for some advice and some resources. The first response that I got from my content club team was to ask if I was okay. They were happy to provide the resources, but they were just as concerned, if not more, with my personal well-being and my professional needs. Given that my work centers around death and grief, it's really nice sometimes to just be asked if I'm okay. So it's okay to ask for help, professionally and personally. My hope for you is that you wouldn't view all of my thoughts today as another item on your to-do list. Start small. Start with what you can actually manage right now. You don't have to do everything. But finding some people who can be your people really will help the work that you do feel less lonely and less chaotic. So get connected. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Just make sure you mention that you were in this meeting, or I have no idea who you are. You can follow me on Medium. You can join a Slack community. You can grab coffee or tea with someone in your office and talk about content. You can network globally and create a team to support you and help you grow in your journey as a content designer. You can network within your own organization to find allies who can help you advocate for a greater role for content. You might be a team of one officially, but that doesn't mean you can't find a new way to define your team. So get out there and find your people, network, be better at the job you already have instead of just looking for a new job. So you can do that too if you want to. But I am quite certain that you will find warm, supportive, and incredibly helpful people who are willing to give of their knowledge and answer your questions and encourage you. And I bet that you'll quickly find that you have opportunities to give back to those very same people and to share what you're learning with others, because we really are better together. So there is my contact information. And when I stop sharing my screen, I'll drop those Slack links in the chat channel. But thank you so much for asking me to speak today. I hope it was helpful, and I am happy to take questions. I think Millie is going to facilitate that. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Thank you.